and we'll begin with a prayer. Let us pray. O Heavenly Father, who hast filled the world with beauty, open, we beseech, our eyes to behold thy gracious hand in all thy works, that rejoicing in thy whole creation we may learn to serve thee with gladness, for the sake of him by whom all things were made, thy Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. All right. So there's coffee, if anybody would like some. It's regular, not hazelnut. Blessedly. Yeah, we found the regular stash that was on top, below the hazelnut stash, which was an abomination. So now we're good. We're good to go. And there's should be sugar there as well. All right. So today we're going to be looking at a very appropriate passage as we move into the Lenten season. Romans 14. Romans chapter 14. In the large print Bibles, that's page 1050. 1050 in the large print. So Romans 14. So first off, let's figure out where we are in the book. We're nearing the end of Paul's magisterial treatment of the gospel that he presents to the Roman Christians. We've moved through now into the part that's it's somewhat incorrect to say that there are firm lines of delineation here, but we're now into the sort of the exhortation part of the book, deeply into it, where Paul is talking about how do we now live in the light of the good news that Christ has defeated death and is the sure sign of the new earth to come, the new world to come, that we will all be citizens of. So if that is our assured end, if that is our telos, if that's where we're heading, how then do we now live in light of that? Because the assumption is that we are going to have to unlearn everything that the fallen world has taught us. This is particularly true, of course, of a big part of Paul's original audience, who were pagan Gentiles, right? So that now they've come into the faith that's entirely alien and foreign to them, right? If one were a practicing Jew, or moving into the Christianity is the fulfillment of what you've been waiting for. This is a thing, it's a much easier transition. Going from being a pagan Gentile into this world is much harder. But, we'll see that there are real hardships, and we see them throughout the letter of both this one and in particular Galatians, that there are also hardships for coming out of into the fulfillment of the Jewish life too, if one is Jewish. All right. So how is that then applicable to us? I think it's it increasingly becomes applicable to us as we move into a world that has less and less contact with the gospel, that is more and more hostile to the gospel. So we have to assume then that the ideas and beliefs that we bring to the Bible are not necessarily, and almost certainly not, the beliefs that the Bible is trying to teach us. Right? And so then that spills out in how we treat other people in the covenant community, right? How we treat other people who are part of the church. So Paul is trying to help us to see what that looks like. And here we're going to be talking about eating and drinking as the means of the way in which he sort of goes about talking about this. But there are a whole sundry list of things in which this, what's often called the law of love, how that operates within the church, within Christ's covenant community. All right, so let's take a look at verse 1 and work our way through here. Verse 1, as for the one who is weak in faith, welcome him, but not to quarrel over opinions. So we have here this first idea of someone entering into the community of faith who is weak in faith. Right? It's important for us to recognize what Paul is getting at in this whole discussion. When he talks about someone who's weak in faith who we are to welcome into the church, he's not referring to someone who denies the gospel, right? It's particularly the essentials of the gospel, right? Someone who's weak in faith is someone here in this case who has a difference in what's often called from the Latin the adiaphora, the sort of kind of non-essential items of the faith, right? We're not talking here about someone saying, "Oh, well, I of course think murder is fine," and then we're like, well, this is just my weaker brother. You can think murder is fine. That's okay. We can work this out. Right? No, this is obviously not a non-essential. We're talking about someone who says, I'm really uncomfortable with something like praying memorized prayers in church. This seems crazy to me. This seems wrong. Now, we would, of course, say, well, the longest book in the Bible is a series of prayers that you say over and over again, the Psalms, right? So it seems to be a pretty good biblical principle that one has prayers, one says over and over again, and the liturgy of our church matches this biblical idea. But am I going to say to someone, I can't be a brother in Christ with you if you think that saying written down prayers is wrong? No, right? We can still be brothers in Christ and sisters in Christ, right? We should know what we believe and why, but that doesn't mean that we have to sort of break fellowship with them. But someone who sounds something like, well, I don't think Jesus is God, right? Well, that we've now broken fellowship out with that, right? That's not someone who's weak in faith. That's someone who's denying the faith. And the distinctions there are become clearer to us as we understand the differences in things between like the moral law and the ceremonial law. Right? When we start to understand differences between the different traditions of churches that can exist simultaneously, and then it's all right. This is clear in it. Right? So we'll keep going through this idea. Whenever we're talking about weak in faith, don't think this is our permission to then throw the moral law away to show how strong in faith we are. But we'll see that as we go along. And just generally, there shouldn't be a lot of quarreling in our churches, right? We should not be a quarrelsome people. This is one advantage of having, I think particularly our system of church government. There should never be a situation in which members of our parish are quarreling with one another over, particularly aphras or non-essentials, but even essentials. If there's a question or a dispute among our congregation, that doesn't just fester and then they hate each other and then one thinks someone's a reprobate, the other one doesn't. That's something you can bring to the church, right? That's something you can bring to me. We can bring to our bishop. We can work through these things together, right? We're never sort of just atomistic things sort of bouncing around in the church. We're one body together. We can work things out. And then, of course, there's an acceptance of authority, right? So particularly on things, whether something's essential or non-essential, our church has spoken on this, right? What's essential and what's non-essential. So we can see those things, for instance, in our articles of religion. Or you can ask your presbytery, ask your bishop, is this an essential thing? Is this a non-essential? And then you can trust and rest in their leadership. Of course, their leadership and their word is dependent upon them being a faithful steward of the mysteries of Christ revealed in the Bible. Right? So there's no sense in which that authority can then supersede the normative authority of the Bible. But it isn't as if we're all just shooting from the hip here and, nobody knows what is going on. I have my truth, you have your truth, we all have our own truths, and none of it matters. No, we're all seeking the same objective truth we find in the Bible that then should be reflected through our church all the way from bishop, priest, deacon, through our laity together. Right? Okay, so 2. This is our case study. Right? One person believes he may eat anything, while the weak person eats only vegetables. When I was in seminary, we were translating and going through the book of Romans, and one week we had all gone, as a bunch of seminarians had gone to lunch and come back, and I was the only one who ate a salad. And when we got back, we had to translate this verse, and my friend said, this is obviously proof that you are the weaker brother. Which I don't think that's what this is talking about. It's not, though. It's just kind of a funny joke. I only ate a salad because we had another 5 hours of classes that day, and I didn't want to fall asleep after a whole lot of barbecue. That's neither here nor there. Prudence is a real virtue. But, so what are we talking about here? I think it's first important to kind of talk about sort of vegetarianism, which is where immediately everyone runs to. Good morning, morning. Where immediately everyone runs to when they first sort of hear this verse. They immediately think, well, is this for or against vegetarianism? Which is really not what it's about at all, right? There isn't any. I mean, you have some interesting little ideas of sort of people eating only vegetables. Like certainly, you have sort of a sense of this before the flood, for instance, and Daniel also talks about this. But there's no sense ever in which Christians are commanded to only eat vegetables. There is no moral law that hangs over you that says one must eat vegetables. Neither is there a law that says you have to eat meat or else. Right? That is also not the case. But there's a certain way in which vegetarianism, if one's doing it for, they think there's health benefit or any reason, that's perfectly fine. But the idea that what vegetarianism and veganism and certain other kinds of practices of what one eats and what one doesn't eat, there's this, they have in our culture kind of a moralism to them, right? It's a way of kind of looking down on people who don't do what you do, right? So that even, it goes both ways, right? So a vegetarian will say, look at someone and say, meat is murder and you're a murderer. What's wrong with you, right? And a person who eats meat will say to the vegetarian, well, you're an idiot. What's wrong with you, right? Those are both not great answers, right? Like, those are both not the kind of welcoming Christian attitude one is looking for when one spreads the gospel, right? What a much more measured response to something that would be is that the real problem with so much of vegetarianism and the idea that cows and humans are equals, right? When people will say that if you eat a cow, it's murder. Is that what inevitably happens is when you conflate humanity and animals, brute animals, together and say they're the same thing, it isn't that you elevate the rights of animals. That isn't actually whatever happens. What ends up happening is you denigrate the rights of humans, right? If you think humans and animals are the same, then whatever a society can do to animals, eventually you will do to humans. It's fascinating how this works, right? Because it is a strange thing that we treat human beings better than animals, right? Oftentimes that's not been the case. Think of all the times in which human beings have been called animals and attempted to be destroyed. And this is one of the key ideas of like the Holocaust, for instance, right? That the Jewish people were subhuman, not human, right? And so you could treat them any way you wanted. This was a case within chattel slavery, right? That people of a different skin color were subhuman, not human, so you could treat them any way you wanted, you could treat them like animals, right? So you get this again and again and again, and it's because this is a concept of our enemy, Satan, right? Question?
Was Hitler a vegan?
I don't believe he was a vegan. I believe he's a vegetarian. He's a vegetarian, yeah. Vegan is a little different. It's even kind of wild. But yeah, I don't want the impression to be that the thing we should recognize is that eating meat or not eating meat does not give one moral authority in any way, right? Because it's creating a new and different law. We human beings love to create laws that attempt to make ourselves better, right? So there's a sense here in which we create this new law that says, well, if I don't eat meat, it makes me a better person, right? Which is a law that God hasn't said, right? So we want to make our own law. The same thing you could do for I eat all the meat and that makes me great, I suppose, right? You can make your own law, right? That doesn't make you a good person either, right? None of that does. The only thing that makes us righteous is the death of Christ imputed to us, right? That's the only thing that makes us good. So creating some rules about this is the thing that makes me good, right? And it can even get into a bad place where I'm doing this so I can live forever. You're not going to live forever, right? So that's also something to avoid, right? So again, so where can this get crazy? I'll get right. One last thing I'll get right to. This can get crazy. Like, would it be better for me to eat only vegetables to protect the animals, but spend more money that I could have given to help the poor and destitute? Because oftentimes this lifestyle is quite expensive. It certainly can be. Well, Is it better to help brute animals or to help people who need our charity? Human beings, made in the image and likeness of God. Right? So you can see how creating a different or moral system can make you make weird choices that don't actually reflect the reality that we live in. Bridget, what do you think?
A lot of people give up meat for Lent.
Sure. So great question. So it's a very, very old tradition that during the 40 days of Lent, we give up meat on Wednesdays and Fridays. And usually, meat once a day and the other days, things like that. And the purpose of that is not, and this is a great point, the purpose of that is not to claim our own self-righteousness, or to say that this somehow is going to earn our salvation, or this somehow even makes us better people. It doesn't, right? What it is it's a way of disciplining ourselves so that we can more easily say no to temptation, to fight against temptation. It unites us with Christ, who fasted for 40 days, and we're going to celebrate, actually, that's our gospel today, and I'm going to preach about it. Jesus fasts for 40 days in the wilderness, so it unites us with him and his experience. Not obviously as serious as he was out in the wilderness with nothing to eat, but it's sort of a connection back to him. And also the skipping of meat, because meat is, and generally has been throughout history, been more expensive. You can save money that you can then give to the poor, right? That was the purpose of it, right? So it's not an inward-looking thing, right? Where I'm doing this thing so that I can have more righteousness, right? Like righteousness juice or something. It's so that I can imitate my Lord, I can follow him better, and then outwardly give to others of my sacrifice, right? So that's a big difference, right? So it's not about us, right? It's about our witness to what Christ has done for us in a physical, real way. In a way that costs us too. I mean, every time you think about, boy, I really would like a hamburger on Friday, what do you remember? I remember that Christ died for my sins on Friday, right? And I wouldn't remember that at that moment, except for that thing I want, that I can know that that my desire is not my master, that my stomach is not my God, that Christ is my God, right? And then I know, of course, that fasting in this life will be replaced in the life to come with an eternal feast. Right? So that's kind of sort of our thoughts on why we would do that. It has nothing to do with even the dietary law of the Old Testament. It has nothing to do with that, because that's the ceremonial law, which again is not binding, and that's what Paul's going to talk about here. That law is not binding. You have a question?
Yes.
Yes.
Didn't Jesus eat meat and fish?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Why? Why do you ask?
Because I get the story from some of these vegetarians that, no, Jesus never ate meat, and in the Garden of Eden they never ate meat.
Well, that's an interesting question.
Maybe.
Yeah, again, I think there are different opinions on this, but it seems as if it isn't until after the flood, and that this becomes a common thing within the picture we get of the people at the time.
Didn't he bring extra, like chickens and goats and stuff because they needed them for food, or no?
Sure, it's a little vague in that regard. Right? It says their provision, but is that what are tigers eat, that kind of thing? It's a really interesting question. Again, the text does not give us a ton of data on that, so I'm sort of loath to kind of just jump into it. But it's kind of beside the point because none of us are on the ark. None of us are there, and that's not our thing we're doing right now. We are in the new covenant people of Christ, and of course, Jesus ate meat. It would have been super strange for him not to, and certainly been something that would have been commented on. He was a normal Jewish man in terms of growing up for decades, working as a carpenter, first with his father, and then later on on his own. So I mean, the idea that that he would have been some kind of proto. The way this tends to work is people try to read back into Jesus the thing that they are. Mm-hmm. Right? There's a great quote from Albert Schweitzer who said that whenever someone tries to look for Jesus in history, what they tend to do is like they're looking into a well and it's got a deep, deep, deep darkness, and then they see an image at the bottom, and it's a reflection of their own face, right? There's a real easy idol to create is to turn Jesus into us, or also an idealized version of us. Me, if I was good, that's who Jesus is, right? Those are both wrong, flat wrong, and terrible, right? That's not who Christ is. Christ is who's been revealed, right? And we know Christ from his revelation in Scripture. That's how we know Christ. So yeah, the idea that he is sort of Christ as, and you see this in movies all the time that portray Christ in ridiculous ways, where he's sort of a proto-feminist, or he's a proto-this, or a proto-that. He's the first of whatever anybody wants him to be. And that is always terrifying. I mean, he's not us, thank God, because we can't save ourselves. Yes?
Yeah, Mark Twain is famous.
Sure.
God created man in his own image, and man, being grateful, returned the favor.
Right, yeah. So I mean, Twain, how to put this kindly? I love Twain, and I've read probably everything he's ever written. It's a hard thing to do, but certainly. He's also kind of a wise ass, for lack of a better term. And he's wrong there, right? And that's a fundamentally, and his Christianity, that's I would say, is not very good. The atheists try to claim him, probably, but it's hard. He's kind of all over the map in terms of this. He's sort of an atheist who believes in original sin, which is a weird space to be in. I'm not saying how that works, but anyway, but with Twain and that quote, the assumption is that human beings created God to fill a need, right? And I think he's right in that false ideas of God are always reflect this humanness in God, fallenness in God that's not there, as a way of trying to worship ourselves.
But it's not, was he saying it sarcastically?
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, kind of. We'll see. We'll see. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he knew he was joking.
Yeah. I mean, with Twain, though, there was always that kind of knowingness where, Twain, as a cynic, right? Twain is at his worst when he's at his most cynical, right? And the problem with the cynic is you never know where exactly they stand, because the cynic, to believe in something is to be uncynical, right? I mean, so sort of his shtick was to be cynical. And so, again, the Lord knows where his heart was. I'm not entirely sure, so I'll leave that to his providence. It's a good quote in terms of saying that, that tends to be what people create, is this idolized version of themselves that they turn into God. So then, how does this then translate into our lives? We talked a little about this as kind of how is this working out here? What we have almost certainly happening in the text here is meat that was being sacrificed to idols, right? So in these pagan temples, you would have meat that would then be sort of burnt and then almost like a barbecue, and then it would be given to the people after the sacrifice, right? And that way they were sort of involved in this worship of the pagan god. And so you had some people within the congregation who would say, no, you absolutely can't eat that. And others who would say, why not? These gods have no power, right? And so you have a certain amount of difference there. And so, but if you're coming from, so say, a Jewish background, this is an abomination to eat of this thing, right? And so Paul's working in that framework, is trying to figure out how do these two different ideas of what's happening, which he's identifying as an adiaphora, as a non-essential, right? How do they live and work together? And what's the way to use the law of love, right? Because about understanding the law of love is that how Christ accepted us is how we must accept others, right? And the way this is normally perverted is to say that, Christ just wants you to be who you are. No, right? Christ says we're all evil. Do you think Christ wants us to be evil? What kind of horrible savior is that, right? It's like you're drowning in water and someone's swimming out, just be you, more drowning, more drowning. Like, that's an evil, horrible person. No, the Savior is one who jumps in and grabs you and drags you up onto the boat and gives you mouth to mouth. Then, what happened? I saved you. That's us, right? And so that's the way we save others too, right? We don't say to them, just be more like yourself. It'll all work out. No, we say, the light has come into the world. God has become man to reveal to us the love of God. And now we have a whole new way of living by following that God-man. Right? Come with me. Let's go. We're going. Right? That's an entirely different way of thinking. But that means that we don't get to judge people on the things that God doesn't care about. Right? So we don't get to say stuff like, I think tattoos are kind of stupid. But yeah, I was in the Navy and I can say that. I somehow managed not to get one. It's kind of amazing. But you don't get to say stuff like, well, you got tattoos. Jesus probably doesn't love you. you don't get to say stuff like that. Right? Or there are all sorts of things, right? Or, this sin you did was so horrible that God can't possibly forgive it, so stay out of our church. Can't say that. Can't say that ever, right? And so there's all sorts of things in which when we're trying to figure out how the law of love works, it's a matter of, well, what has Christ done for me, right? And what then do I owe the other person, right? You see this, of course, in the parable of the unjust steward, where you have where the king forgives this massive debt to a servant. The debt is so big, it's like a country's debt. And then the guy says, oh, thank you so much. Then he goes out and beats up a guy for like 100 pennies and says, go to jail, I want my pennies. And then, of course, the king hears about this and he brings him forward and said, how could you not forgive this person after I forgave you your massive debt? And then he throws him into utter darkness, which is not good, right? So there's a sense here in which the way in which we have been loved by Christ is the way in which we love others. And there's just no getting around that. Question?
Yes.
Please.
The man that asked Jesus how many times I forgive my brother? 70
Peter,
times 7.
right. Peter asked him, yeah.
Oh, I forgot it was Peter.
Yeah, no worries. And Peter's trying to show off in that sense.
Yeah, he is.
Like, well, what about I'll forgive him 7 times? And Jesus says, well, that's not right. You need to forgive him 70 times 7, right? Or
Which is like an infinite number.
Right, so it's basically 7 is the number of completeness, like the earth is made in 7 days, right? And there's 7 days of the day of rest. So it's the completeness times completeness, so it's every time, all the time, right? You always have to forgive.
It's not 490 times.
It's not like, you get to count up, like you get like a ledger, like you get 489 up now, but get this guy. He's got one more time, but it's not like that. Because you've been forgiven this massive debt, right? By Christ dying for you. So
An infinite debt.
An infinite debt, right? Yeah, a debt you can never possibly pay. So that's a really key idea there in this law of love, how it then translates out. Right? Okay, so continuing on. Verse 3, let not the one who eats despise the one who abstains, and let not the one who abstains pass judgment on the one who eats, for God has welcomed him. Right? So the sense even here is the person who's entered the church, it's not because you have welcomed them, it's because God has brought them in. Right? It's when the good shepherd goes out to find the lost sheep, is it the sheep who go? No, it's the shepherd who leaves the 90 and 9 to go get the 1. Right? And when that sheep comes back, the sheep don't get to go, man, who's that sheep? That guy must be awesome. Or what a jerk, right? No, who cares what the sheep think? Right? It's the shepherd who's doing the work. He's doing all the saving. We don't get to go, oh man, that guy, what a jerk. He should be in the kingdom of God, right?
Because when the sheep gets lost, he won't go anywhere. He'll just stay wherever he is.
That's how sheep operate.
Yeah, they got to either.
Yeah, no.
That's why you have to pick him up and drag him back.
Yeah, well, that image of the shepherd with the sheep over his shoulders, like everyone's smiling, like in real life, that's like stupid sheep. That sheep's trying to bite in, and it's like, no, that's a bad. Like I love that image of the shepherd. Everyone's just super happy. You're like, no, that's not how that works. Right? It's all. But yeah, it's ideally that would be how it works. That's not how it works. And we're the sheep, right? And Jesus is dragging us back. Right? Thank God, though, right? You want that, rather than just being left to die in the wilderness. All right. Verse 4, who are you to pass judgment on the servant of another? It is before his own master that he stands or falls, and he will be upheld, for the Lord is able to make him stand. So that whole argument is fantastic. So it's, who are you to judge this person who's not your servant? It's Christ's servant, right? So you aren't, that is not your capacity here. But people often say, no one can judge me but God. And that's true. I mean, there's still church discipline. We still want to, as your presbyter, I'm going to tell you, hey, you're messing up in a terrible way, and you should. The worst part, if you can't go move away from your sinful life, you should abstain from going to the Lord's table. I mean, that's a real thing, right? But here, in terms of the final judgment, like you're going to hell, there's the only sense that God is the only one who can judge that. But then when people say they want to be judged by God, they will be. Everyone really, really will be judged by God. And so that's Paul's appealing to here. Like, it's not your place to judge your brother in these matters of adiaphora, these non-essentials, because God is his judge. That's not your place. He's not yours to judge. But then he says in this last part, and your brother will be upheld, for the Lord is able to make him stand. So there's a sense here in which we think of this judgment as sometimes as being like a human judge who is capricious and maybe had a bad day or whatever, is incapable of dispensing perfect justice. But that's not what we're dealing with God. We're dealing with God who not only is dispensing justice, but is giving us the means to be acquitted. Right? I mean, if you think of the great throne room judgment, Christians will stand before the judge wearing the righteousness of Christ. Right? So not only God is judge, but he's also giving you the innocent verdict, which is hard to wrap our heads around, right? But that's unusual. Judges don't do that. We would say that's actually unfair of the judge. The judge should just judge me for what I've done, right? That would be fair. This isn't fair. This is grace. And so the grace is that you are given the righteousness of Christ to stand before the throne. And if you have that, you will stand. Right? You got things there. Right. You would hope so. But people don't think like that often. They think they want fair. And fair is wrath. Fair is wrath. Grace is life. Paul says this again and again and again. If you want the law, if you want your goodness to be dependent upon you being a vegetarian, you can have that, but it's not going to work out. Because it's not true. You can't possibly be good this way. Right? And what would that goodness even be? It's a goodness you made up. Right? It's a goodness we made up. Who cares about a goodness we make up? Let's make it up your own rules to baseball, then go ahead and try to play it. Nobody cares. Well, I think I should have 4 strikes instead of 3. Okay, nobody cares. You're out. That's not how this works. Nobody cares. Right? That's nice. My children will try that, right? To make up rules to stuff that aren't real. That's nice. None of that's true. None of that matters, right? You can keep doing that. Who cares? All right. Verse 5. One person esteems one day as better than another, while another esteems all days alike. He's almost certainly not talking about the Sabbath here, though maybe because again, there's that transition period between Saturday and Sunday being sort of the holy days of the church, right? Sunday, of course, becoming the day as it's the first day of the new creation. It's the day Christ rose from the grave. So we celebrate every Sunday is an Easter, right? That's why, for instance, in Lent today, you don't have to fast today, right? Today is a non-fasting day because it's a Sunday. It's a mini Easter, right? The Sunday, the celebration of the resurrection, trumps the fast, right? There's a sense, too, in which it's a way of, Jesus says when the bridegroom is with you, you don't have to fast. There's a sense in which we're kind of sort of connected to that, too, with the bridegroom coming back on Easter day. So it's a cool thing, right? That's why it's 40 days of fasting. That's why you have the 3 days in the week of Ash Wednesday and then Thursday and Friday. So that makes up for the days you lose in the Sundays. That's how it becomes 40. This is approximately, right? All right. So he's saying that the holy days of the Jewish calendar, which is almost certainly what this is about, that those can be important, but also are adiaphora, right? The same thing with our calendar, right? Do I think someone who doesn't like for instance, celebrate Ash Wednesday is a reprobate who's going to hell? No, I don't. I think it's an important day. I think it's really important for us to remember our own mortality in a world that denies its mortality constantly. I think that's super important. And I think people who think we don't need it are naive about our human nature. But I don't think this is a matter of bad apple. It's not an essential of the gospel that someone get ashes put on their head on Ash Wednesday, right? Now, I think it's a great idea, and one of the wonderful things about being part of a traditional church is that we don't have to overthink this stuff. Like the church says do it, so we just do it. It's a good thing. It's not ours to sort of parse out. But yeah, so that would be an example of that, right? in our own role. Question.
Run that by me again about Ash Wednesday. I didn't quite understand.
So the idea here is that, like, what is it about? Why do we do it?
That,
Yeah.
because that's going to be my question. I was going to
Sure.
ask at the end.
Yeah.
Because I always see these people have it done,
Right.
and I always wonder, because I've never been to an Ash Wednesday service.
Oh, sure.
So I am
What's it about?
totally confused.
So the ashes are the palms from Palm Sunday burned, right? So we take the palms from Palm Sunday and we burn them into ashes. Because remember, Palm Sunday is the beginning of Holy Week of last year, so it comes back around here. And the ashes are, there's a beautiful image there of the things that were thrown to proclaim Christ, are then burned to remind us of our mortality. But then the ashes are taken and they're crossed on our head. The cross, of course, being the only way in which those ashes aren't our final judge, right? That death is our final judge. And we're reminded, we were told, remember, O man, that thou art dust, and unto dust shalt thou return. It's the same words that are used in our burial service. So it's a yearly reminder that we are all dying. It's a yearly reminder that there is no escaping the fact that we are going to have to fight the last enemy, which is death, right? But in that service, we continue on, right? First of all, there's a cross which reminds us that death has been defeated by the cross of Christ. Second, we move into the fact that we have the Eucharist service, the communion service, which reminds us that we're united to the God-man who defeated death, right? That the solution to death has already come, and that we need not be afraid of it or terrified by it at all. Right? So some might think of it as being morbid, right? Why would one be thinking about death? But it's actually a good thing to think about it and to recognize that it has no hold on us anymore. That frees us to then move into the Lenten fast and do stuff like, well, I can abstain from this cheeseburger today and give that money I would spend to a person who has less, because I'm not dependent upon this life as to be fulfilled in. I don't need to get every bit of enjoyment out of this life or it's been a waste. Because I know that death is not the end. And I remember that year after year after year after year after year. Question?
That's why McDonald's put the fish sandwich in. Because people weren't coming to McDonald's on Fridays during Lent in Chicago.
Sure.
They invented the fish sandwich.
Sure, right. So I mean, that's people say that's their favorite Lenten thing at McDonald's. But yeah, so again, it's a little sacrifice that reminds us of that too. That comes into the Lenten fast. Ash Wednesday is not technically about the fast. It's about the remembrance of death. That's, for instance, we ash babies who don't fast. We ash really old, sick people who aren't going to fast. We ash too. It's a remembrance of that mortality.
So it's not like something that we have to come to church to have done to go and do the fasting.
No. The fast is the fast. Right? The 40-day fast is its own thing. The ashes are just a remembrance that it starts on the first day of the 40-day fast, but it's a remembrance of our mortality and our rendezvous with the grave.
Okay.
Right? I mean, it's a friend of mine who was a priest had this poignant thing. He pointed out to me, how many people do we ash and say those words are the same people we're going to throw dirt on their grave when we bury them, which is something to think about. And it always fills me with awe and wonder every Ash Wednesday as I do that, right? Because that's inevitable. And it's hard for us sometimes to make that connection to, yeah, I really am going to die. I really am. And what does that mean? Because so much of our world is about distracting us from that, or making us not think about it. But there's no reason not to, because we're not afraid of it. It has no fear for us, no terror. Death, where is thy sting, as St. Paul says. That's a rhetorical question. It has no sting, right? It's great. It's one of its good news. So yeah, that's big picture stuff, right? Death and resurrection. Paul says that's something to talk about and dwell on. Eating meat or not eating meat is not. There's a much smaller thing, right? Particularly when it's in this avenue. But the important thing is, as he's getting to, is that because Christ has done the work in this, Christ is the one who has authority in these matters. So let's keep going a little bit more, and then I have to run. Verse 6, the one who observes the day observes it in honor of the Lord. The one who eats in honor of the Lord. As he gives thanks to God. Well, the one who abstains in honor of the Lord and gives thanks to God. For none of us lives to himself, and none of us dies to himself. For if we live to the Lord, and if we die to the Lord. So then, whether we live or whether we die, we are the Lord's. It's a beautiful, beautiful meditation. But, it's beautiful, and people tend to focus on the idea that in death or life we can't be separated from God. But it also, Paul's using it in context of saying, you can't then put an undue burden on your brother, right, or sister in the faith. Because who do you belong to? Not yourself, not to your job, not to even our spouses. We don't belong to them. Who do we belong to? We belong to God, right? In life and death, right? In life and death, which is incredible. He continues this beautiful passage. For to this end, for this purpose, Christ died and lived again, that he might be Lord both of the dead and of the living. Why do you pass judgment on your brother? Or why do you despise your brother? For we will all stand before the judgment seat of God, as it is written, this is from Isaiah, as I live, says the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall confess to God. So then each of us will give an account of himself to God. So that ultimately, people say all the time, well, I'd rather be king in hell than serve in heaven. That's not how any of this works. Everybody's going to bow the knee, right? Everyone is going to. The idea that you could stand before the all-powerful God and still be an atheist is preposterous, right? No one is going to be an atheist when they stand before the living God. They're going to be on their knees, terrified, right? Filled with terror, right? And I don't mean that in a negative way necessarily, but there's negative if you are due the wrath of God, right? But it's going to be, awe. The old term awful, we say awful now to mean always bad, but all it means is full of awe. And so can you imagine being, like, awful really describes this, like you're just, it's incredible even to imagine, right? And in that space, arguments over adiaphora, over non-essentials, suddenly become super less important, right? The essentials are what become important. And those are the things which bind us together. And then the other parts of it, the adiaphora, though, what days are special, what foods and things can we eat, that becomes something that we can talk through and work through as a community. Right? These aren't things that should separate us. Right? It doesn't mean we're always going to get our way. Right? And then we just pick up sticks and leave when we don't like it. Right? No, it does not mean that. But it does mean that these things are not the essentials that will have ultimate eternal importance. Right? We should recognize that. So when we think about our Lenten fast, which again is an incredibly important thing, he's not talking about that here, right? Paul's not talking about that. But we can sort of draw from it sort of kind of a paradigm. Right? We should be very careful in understanding that our Lenten fast is not about judging other people. It's not about even judging ourselves. It's about preparing ourselves for future battles in our spiritual lives, right? Real battles, temptations that are real and terrible that we need to fight against. And it's about helping others with what we've sacrificed, right? John, last question, then I got to run.
Question for you. When the